Right? Physical violence. In fiction, it comes in two flavors: cartoon violence and serious violence. Pokemon has physical violence, and it also comes in those two flavors. The first, cartoon violence, is far more common in Pokemon. Obviously, it is a franchise for children. You'll see it all the time, especially in the anime, a cartoon, where people, Ash in particular, are routinely electrocuted or charred to a crisp or endure some other kind of horrific injury that has no effect on them at all and is forgotten by the next scene. That is cartoon violence in a nutshell. Basically, a visual slapstick gag. But Pokemon does occasionally do serious violence too. There's a famous viral clip from the Pokemon Origins miniseries where a Squirtle uses Bite on a Charmander. The Squirtle's mouth is shown digging into the Charmander's skin, and the Charmander screams in quite a distressing way, actually. Despite this being a literal cartoon. This isn't cartoon violence, this is pretty serious violence. And I'm elaborating on this difference between cartoon and serious violence because of what appears in Pokemon Adventures. Despite it being a manga, a comic for children, a cartoon, its violence feels serious, surprisingly serious. It has the exact same vibes of that Squirtle biting that Charmander. And it blindsides you. It's a bit like, whoa, jeez. I wasn't expecting that's a bit strong. It is not something that is played for laughs, and it is not something that is forgotten by the next scene. I've cited a couple of examples in our previous videos. Lieutenant Surge trying to electrocute our protagonist to death, a Charmeleon slicing an Arbok in half, Giovanni's Cloister killing 2 Magmar, and this book's got just as good, if not better, examples of it. So before we get to the places where this manga deviates from quote-unquote standard Pokemon, as we've been doing in this series, I want to show you just how seriously violent things can get in this book. First though, quick thoughts on the book. This is the final book in the first arc of the series. It is our finale, covering several events. Major events you should be familiar with if you've ever played any one of the Gen 1 games or their remakes. The Silph Co saga, where our main characters retake the building from the occupying Team Rocket force. The acquisition of the last badge, the capture of Mewtwo, the Indigo Plateau. While the specifics of those events are not like anything you've seen, which we'll be going into, they are there and they really do bring the whole arc to a proper climax. It gets epic, about as epic and action-packed as a Pokemon comic could possibly get, and it all comes to a nice, satisfying, cathartic conclusion. Characters complete their arcs, with Blue becoming nicer and respectful of his rival Red, and Green mending her trickster, con artist ways. Team Rocket is defeated, and our protagonist gets his ultimate triumph. And we even get the introduction of the character who will be the protagonist for the upcoming arc. And some foreshadowing of the Elite Four, whom, given that 4 out of the 8 gym leaders in this arc were evil, I'm guessing and remembering poorly from the last time I read this, that at least some of those will be the next antagonists. It does everything a final installment in a manga arc needs to do, really. So yeah, what I said in the last video hasn't changed here. It is enjoyable for the strange take on Pokemon that it is. Okay, on to the violence. This book sets the tone perfectly, with our main character at the most minor of provocations throwing a punch on the second page. Throwing a punch in a conversational situation is somewhat of a big deal in almost any fictional genre, but it is small potatoes here, because here's Koga getting straight up stabbed in the shoulder by a Scyther's blade so that blood is drawn. A person getting physically wounded by a Pokemon is something that is always tiptoed around in the franchise, but Adventures is like a shank's a shank. You stab a man, he's gonna bleed. Koga then returns the favour by trying to suffocate a child with a Grimer. This panel here, with Blue dying, is what I mean about this being much more serious violence over cartoon violence. Ash and his friends have been in peril before, but this, a boy being suffocated, feels like it's on a completely separate plane, as does this, a different little boy getting hit with, for all intents and purposes, an electrical grenade and launched into an electrical fence. Look at him. He's screaming. Here's him screaming again. This is, like the Charmander I mentioned earlier, quite distressing. Imagine if this image had sound. Imagine if this image had sound. Blue getting slashed across the gut. Or this, Red being retossed back into that electrical fence, this time by Surge. This one feels like the worst one because there are no Pokemon involved. It's just a grown man throwing a 10-year-old into an electrical fence. He gets his comeuppance though. This feels a little cartoony if you ask me, but it is still some pretty strong imagery. Would you like to see a Blastoise's shell smashed well before the move Shell Smash existed? Looks painful. What's under there? Just soft tissue and internal organs, probably. Freezing someone solid in a block of ice would probably kill that person. So hey, why don't we freeze our two boys solid while we're at it? Oh, and a Pidgeot too. Would a giant rock to the spine hurt? Yes, it would. How Red isn't paralyzed after this is beyond me. Again, look at his face. This is genuine anguish. This is not fun Wile E. Coyote violence. Physical violence. I hope these examples show that I wasn't talking nonsense about this being serious violence over cartoon violence. And I hope this shows just how weird of an experience reading this children's comic actually is, because on nearly every page there is some instance of brutal, serious violence. I wouldn't say it affects the overall quality, at least for me, because it's so off-kilter in the context of a children's comic, and especially in the context of the Pokemon franchise as a whole. Speaking of which, let's take a look at where this book takes the established tropes and norms of the Pokemon franchise and throws them into a blender. Pallet Town has far more importance here than it has in any other medium. It is apparently the only place in the whole Pokemon world where Pokemon aren't threatened by a form of pollution. A sweeping statement right there, Blue. And it is also the place where every single Pokemon League champion has ever come from. That is frankly absurd. Imagine if every single heavyweight boxing champion there has ever been all came from the same small countryside town. You'd be like, I think someone might be lying about where they're from. I understand that the Pokemon world hasn't been expanded yet here in 1998 or whatever it was, like it has been here in 2025. But even still, you talk about the entire Kanto region here. These are both pretty crazy things to say about the place. The Pokédex has the ability to visualize Golduck's psychic brainwaves. It's pretty cool. Green attempts to bring down the fourth wall with a little wink at the camera here. What do you think this is? A video game? Lol. Because it's based on a video game. But here's the thing. In the panel before, the fourth wall was already completely annihilated by an actual screenshot from the games in universe. Look at this. What does this mean for our character's reality? Is this like one of those modern lazy isekai animes where all of the characters are just characters in a video game? Is this even a manga at all? What is happening here? You can wear living Pokemon with Koga wearing a Grimer and an Ekans, and Lieutenant Surge wearing two Magneton and a bandolier of tiny but very much alive Voltorb and Electrode. The latter two he loads into a bazooka and shoots. Pokemon as tools is a very interesting concept that, if explored and developed properly, would result in the Pokemon world being so far removed from our world and the world that is presented here and in the games and in the anime. It would be unrecognizable, so it can't really be addressed. Every single thing in the whole world would be completely different if there were creatures that could generate Pokemon levels of electricity, or could cause city-destroying earthquakes, or even could just go properly invisible. You'd have to consider absolutely everything if you start looking at Pokemon like that, so no one ever does, so let's not do that either. Gym badges. Like Pallet Town, gym badges have huge importance here, way more than they do in any other medium. Everywhere else, they're just indicators of progress, admin. really. Here, well, Red, first of all, gets less of his gym badges through beating gym leaders than even Ash did back in Kanto. By my count, he only actually beats Brock and Erica in battles. The rest he just gets given or like picked up off the ground. Though the book does try to gaslight you into thinking he beat Misty too. No. I went back, remember, he did not get the badge in that scene. But aside from that, the badges themselves seem to have some kind of magic powers and are used to directly control Pokemon and power a device that can do this. Pokemon Fusion. Have you ever seen anything like this? Arctozaptress. Zapticuno. No, that's no Moltres. Zaptricuno? Zaptricuno? No, because it's Uno Dos Tres, so Arctozaptress would be the right order, wouldn't it? I mean, I think this might be going overboard, right? I said that Eevee from the last book that could evolve into one of its evolutions, then turn back into the Eevee, and then turn into a different evolution felt like fanficky in a good way. This feels fanficky in a bad way. Red intentionally evolves a Pokemon that doesn't belong to him. Rude. And here's Blaine's arm. Yucky. Why does it look like that? Well, he used some of his own bodily tissue to create the artificial Pokemon Mewtwo. Have you heard anything like that from Pokemon before? No, because it's something from the SCP universe. But it's in here, as is that same Mewtwo fighting with a giant spoon. I thought spoons were sort of the Alakazam lines thing. None of their spoons have got anything on this spoon, though. Pokeballs can break, trapping the Pokemon inside. This is evidently fixable because Red does get his Gyarados and Venusaur out after this. But this is still a terrifying prospect that I don't think I've seen anywhere else. And it's especially terrifying here because it has been established that Pokemon are conscious when they are shrunk down and put into their Pokeballs. And lastly, uneven battle formats. In the final of the Indigo Plateau tournament, Red defeats Blue using 4 Pokemon to Blue's 3. Blue uses Charizard, Ninetales and Machamp, and Red uses Venusaur, Pikachu, Poliwrath and Snorlax. Is this fair? I know in the games nearly every single battle is uneven, because most of the time you're going to have 6 Pokemon and your opponents rarely ever do. So this is not all that unprecedented, but as this is a far more fleshed out living world, like the anime as opposed to the linear world of the game, it just feels wrong. This is an official tournament, and in the final, one person can just have a massive advantage. Why? Why any of this? Is that the question? Why? Well, to do something different, I guess. When you've already got pre-established, incredibly popular mediums in your franchise, and you want to add another, make it different. And boy did Pokemon Adventures try something different. If you've experienced this alongside the games and the anime, it will absolutely hold its own in your perception of the franchise as a whole. You won't forget it. It's just less iconic because less people have experienced it in total. And I think that's a real shame. And I know it gets even more balls to the wall after this, with Red being frozen solid for like a year or something. And Price being like an evil wizard with child soldiers and a guy called Henry. But I think I'll be leaving the series here. 3 volumes done, the first full arc covered. I think I mentioned this in an outro from a previous video, but I think if I carried on, I might just be being a dead horse. We get the picture now. Pokemon Adventures is a weird funhouse mirror incarnation of the Pokemon universe. I think I've gotten that across. I don't want to get stale, and I don't want to be doing like 27 videos or whatever it is in this series. So I'll have to find something different to cover the pseudo filler weeks. Hello, thanks a lot for getting to the end of the video. Like and subscribe. Done, I think. Yeah, done with Pokemon Adventures. Maybe we'll come back to it at a later date. I've got an idea for at least the next, not the next video, the next video is a movie one, but the one after that is going to be quite a bit different to what's normally on this channel, but should be enjoyable nonetheless. I will see you there.